And then at university, I also took part in debating. I represented Durham University Team A, where we competed across the UK, Europe, and then also globally. And then since graduating, I've been working with the English Speaking Union predominantly as a judge and an oracy trainer. So our main aim is to really kind of go into schools and teach students how to debate, but also try and get kind of maybe underprivileged students into debating, or get those that maybe wouldn't consider debating as a kind of extracurricular or something that they think they can't do, and kind of get them involved with that. So that's kind of more what I do at the moment.
Awesome. And now we'd like to meet our Deputy Prime Minister.
Hi, everyone. My name's Aya. Similar to Yasmin, I graduated university a few years ago. I did law at the University of Nottingham. I am now training to be a solicitor in London, and I got into debating a bit later on. I got into it during university, but the great thing about debating is that you can really join at any point and, you know, pick it up, and it's great fun. It's a great way of like meeting people and also just sharing opinions, and also picking up an argument at any point and you know, fighting the other side. And it's quite fun just to, you know, and it helps you kind of read into things more and find out about the world in general, and it just kind of makes you feel like you need to be up to date with the news and what's going on in life. And so that's really why I enjoy it. And then since then, I've been with the English Speaking Union, teaching debating to younger children, and I think just helping them find their voices, helping them with their confidence. And I think it's really good for people who aren't as confident, just pushing yourself into it and having fun with it. And yeah, and that's why I've continued to do it.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And now I'd like to introduce the hybrid team we have from 2 different universities in the United States working together. So first, can we hear from the Leader of the Opposition?
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Marino. I'm representing Loyola University Chicago today on the Team USA hybrid. I'm currently a senior at Loyola studying biochemistry and history. And people on my debate team often ask, like, why does someone who want to go into science also participate in debate? But just throughout my life, I've always been interested in world events and history, understanding new arguments, new cultures, new people. So I actually got into debate in high school, and I know my parents thought I would be good at it after arguing with them over basically anything. But I think it's really been helpful for me to just branch out and understand different things. I think I've learned so much about things that I would never learn in the classroom or never would have even heard about from my background. So it's really put me in the position to be able to just learn so much from other people and get other people's perspectives, which is why I think it's so valuable for people from all different backgrounds and majors and different positions in life to all participate in this. So I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you. And now we'd like to hear from the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Hi, my name is Solomon. I'm on the US side as well, representing the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I am a senior studying computer science. I'd like to echo some of the words that Mark said. I think that this activity is really good at getting people to think critically, learning how to speak, learning how to write, learning how to be confident presenters. Those are skills that no matter what field you want to go into, differentiate those who make it to the top and those who don't. So I think that this is a really important activity, as well as just a fun thing for me to do. I personally think that it should be integrated more into the curriculum just because I think it's so useful. But yeah, that's kind of why I did debate.
Thank you all for agreeing to be a part of this today. And that includes you, the audience, because the good connection here is you are integrated into this today, because at the end of the debate, we're not quite over yet. The floor will be open to you to ask questions for a total of 15 minutes of our speakers. And then we'll ask you, the audience, to render a decision, hopefully based on the arguments you hear from the speakers and not the ones that you prefer yourselves. With that being said, I'd like to call the Prime Minister forward to give a 6-minute constructive speech in favor of the motion. This House believes we should delete our social media accounts. Hear, hear.
Thank you, David. So we've all had that feeling when we log on to a social media platform like Instagram or Facebook and we see a picture. And it could be a picture of anything. It could be a picture of a celebrity without an ounce of fat on their body. It could be a party that you weren't necessarily invited to. It could be a family friend posting about their holiday to the Caribbean. Or it could just be a friend posting about how productive their day has been and how they've just got their new dream job. And you see all of this with just a click of the button. And the problem is you probably see it whilst you lie there on the sofa, probably in your pajamas with a lot of ice cream, watching some sort of Netflix true crime documentary in the background. And you sit there questioning your life choices. At least I've been there and I've done that. And although we're probably so familiar with this scenario, and we'll probably sit here and say, well, what's wrong with that? Everyone does it. We just accept it for what it is. It's this type of behavior, when reoccurring, becomes unhealthy and demoralizing. And all of this is caused by social media itself. And that's why we're going to argue today that we should delete all of our social media accounts. Now, by social media, we're talking about social platforms where the primary purpose of them is not for communication, but for other things. So, for example, we mean companies like Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. But what we don't include in this motion is something like WhatsApp or email, as their primary function use is more for communication rather than, say, sharing updates of your life or posting pictures. So in this speech, I'm going to talk about the individual harms that social media presents. I'm going to cover things such as unrealistic nature of these platforms, as well as safety issues they pose. And in contrast, I will talk more about the negative societal impacts of social media and the impact it has on society through things like addictiveness and ability to control what you think and do. So let's start with the first argument. We should delete our social media accounts because of the harmful impacts they have on people's self-esteem and happiness. We see images all the time on social media that are edited or tweaked, either be that through a filter or worse, Photoshop. Now, inherently, there is nothing wrong with, say, adding a filter to a picture. There is nothing wrong with someone Photoshopping themselves onto another picture if that's what they want to do. But the issue is we don't know they do that. When you go on Instagram, you don't see a notification underneath that photo that says, please note, this photo has been edited. I actually have way less muscle in real life, or I'm way fatter than this in real life, or I'm way skinnier than this in real life. We don't see that. So us sitting at home looking on our phone, we think it's real. And the impact of that is that we start to question ourselves. Maybe not once, maybe not twice, but if seen 1,000 times every single day, you start to question yourself. You repeatedly see images that don't look like you, and you start to think, why don't I look like that? Why does my life not look like that? And it's these questions that play over and over in your mind that cause issues such as self-esteem issues. Now, whilst you might think it's kind of contained to an individual problem, okay, fine, someone has self-esteem issues. This actually leads to wider problems in society. Leads to things such as mental health issues, leads to things such as eating disorders or depression. And there has been a proven link. A lot of clinical psychological studies have shown that young people are highly affected by what they see on social media. A study in 2017 found that over 500,000 8th to 12th graders found number exhibiting high levels of depressive symptoms increased by 33% between 2010 and 2015. And in the same period, the suicide rate for girls in that age group increased by 65%. And these numbers coincide with the rise of social media. And the impact of this is vast. It stops you from going to school. It makes you doubt your abilities in a job. It affects your social relationships with friends and family. So it's not just the individual harm, but it's how this issue of self-esteem can affect the rest of the society. Dealing with issues is taxing on the economy through health services, for example. Seeing your GP, being offered medication or counselling, all of that costs money. And that's talking from the perspective of the US, from the UK even. We don't know what it's like in the US when you actually don't even have free healthcare. So for example, you'd end up paying even more and having an even greater impact on society. So whilst you might think a simple scroll is not that bad, doing it over and over again really does have an impact on the individual and on society. Now, secondly, the other argument for banning social media accounts relates to safety. Now, whilst you might hear from the opposition that social media is great, it's allowed us to chat to people all around the world and connect with them, which we do agree to some extent is great, it's also a huge and very dangerous problem. The fact that, for example, a child aged 13 living in France could be speaking to a man that she's never met who's age 60 and lives in Australia is alarming and concerning. And even if there may be nothing wrong inherently in this conversation that they may be having, it's alarming that this is able to happen. And even if we say that these children should be regulated by their parents or other means, it's not always the case. These relationships with anyone around the world can lead to abuse, exploitation, or worse. And even in an extreme example, and we think most people are careful, we think most of us, have the right privacy settings, for example, that doesn't mean we are exempt. The amount of data that is being able to be retrieved via social media is alarming, and people can do anything with that data. People can track your locations, they can hack into your computers to gain information, or worse, you could be a victim of something like catfishing. And even though we laugh about catfishing, we might watch the TV show Catfish UK, Catfish US, whatever, and think, well, we'd never fall victim to that. Actually, 1 in 4 women have fallen victim to some sort of scam or catfish, predominantly happening even across social media. So whilst we might think that we are very distant to it, we are not. We are very, very closely linked to the potential online harms. So for the reason that social media is both bad for your safety and also has an impact on individual self-esteem, we beg you to delete all our social media accounts and support this motion.
Thank the speaker for their comments. And now we will open the cross-examination period to be led by the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
All right. Timer out. Okay. My first question is addiction unique to social media?
No, addiction is not unique to social media. But just because it's not unique, it doesn't mean that social media doesn't encourage that. Yes, you're right. You can still be addicted to 101 other things that aren't social media. But the fact that you can be addicted to social media and that can lead to detrimental problems is something that we need to address. And by deleting our social media accounts, we remove that form of addiction.
Okay, so let's contextualize this argument to your self-esteem argument, right? So why don't like magazines that we see at like the checkout aisle do the same thing to young girls, or like similar examples? Like why aren't conventional like media causing these same issues?
So it probably does to some extent. You're right. If there's a magazine, if there's a Vogue magazine when you go shopping, you might get a quick glimpse of it and think, oh wow, I don't look like that woman. But the issue is that that magazine doesn't invade your home. That doesn't invade your mind at every hour unless you choose to purchase it. The difference is with social media, it's everywhere. You might download an Instagram account just because you want to talk to 5 people, but the minute you click on kind of what's going on in the world, you see things that you didn't even want to see. So the difference between social media and conventional media is that you opt in to look at other conventional media, whereas social media can go to bed with you. It can be in bed with you. It can be when you wake up in the shower. It can be whilst you sit on the toilet, for example. None of that has the impact that like a Vogue magazine does, for example, in a supermarket.
Well, it seems like the argument is more of a function of like modern society than the technology itself. Like the example, reading in the bathroom, right? Like people used to do these things. And in terms of the invasion and not intending to look at these things, like for example, let's say you buy a magazine that's about sports and there's an advertisement in there and there's an unrealistic person. Like what is the distinction between that and social media?
I think, like I said, the thing with social media is that it's everywhere and it poses harms to people of all ages. So for example, even when we have something like a sports magazine that might be purchased by a certain aged person who knows what they are like looking at, or they've chosen to purchase that magazine. In comparison, a 12-year-old might get a social media account thinking that they're only going to be in contact with their classmates, but then be exposed to an array of things that they didn't even realize existed until they got onto the social media platform. And then they see things like images that aren't realistic. They see things
that
about—
unfortunately is our time. I thank both speakers for the thoughtful questions and responses. And now I invite the Leader of the Opposition to rise and give a speech not lasting more than 6 minutes in length against the motion. Hear, hear.
Alrighty, thank you for those comments. Before we start, I just wish to extend my thanks to my coach, David Romanelli, as well as all the other people responsible for organizing this debate. I'm very glad to see the continuance of these free spaces, and oddly enough, largely organized through social media. So with that, let's begin. So today I'd like to begin the debate for the opposition case. We want to talk a little bit about the framing of today's debate. I think it's important to modulate the lens of how we view today's debate. And I'd also like to bring up 2 major points. One is that technology is inevitable and unavoidable. And the second one is that liberal movements in autocratic states rely on social media in order to survive. So first, let's get into framing. Since the government did not choose to define what the House is in today's debate, I think it's really important that we look at this debate not just through an individual's choice, whether or not they should be deleting their social media account themselves, but Obviously, I think we need to understand that this is a debate that is going to be held on a much greater global stage. Obviously, some individuals may benefit from deleting their social media accounts, but the only way to have a fair debate is to talk about whether our relationship with social media on a whole as a society is beneficial to us. Since debate uses rational arguments, I think if the government's case is to be believed, their reasoning would also certainly encourage other people to follow suit, not just talking about your choice personally, but other people's choices as well. And therefore, I think we need to discuss arguments as they impact the global community today. Let's talk a little bit about technology. The government brings up all these deleterious effects of social media, which represent a revolution in communication, information, and sharing. However, all of these arguments that they bring up in social media, many of them are non-unique to the technology of social media themselves. As my partner brings up in CrossX, you could look at advertisements, you could look at television, you could look at all these other functions in our society where we're going to be bombarded by unrealistic images. Even if you do delete your Instagram, I'm sure your friend's going to be showing you the picture that John or Alyssa spent 15 hours photoshopping with 5 filters and all these different light setups. And so you're still going to get that from social media in the first place. You're going to get it from other outlets like television, reality shows, whatever. You're also going to get it from the internet itself. And you're going to be, if you have FOMO, you can get that from being texting with your friends, and they'll tell you about the party they went to last night that you weren't invited to anyway. So all those things I think fall into a non-unique category that don't purely pertain to social media. Furthermore, we believe that when it comes to technology, it's unavoidable. And the big thing is whether you participate or not, it's still going to exist and it's still going to rule the world. We have modern medicine, we have nuclear fission. These are technologies that have huge risks to society if they're abused. However, at the same time, we participate in them because we can refine them, we can regulate them, we can make them better, and we could reap a huge benefit to society while minimizing the harms. What happens when we all delete our social media accounts is we lose our say in the conversation. By participating, and only through participating, and talking to governments and talking to the social media companies themselves, we can modulate social media and we can try to limit those harms. We can try to limit sex predation. We can try to limit the negative stuff you see. We can try to make it where you as the user have more power to modulate your feed so that you don't see everything you don't want to see. And it's a much cleaner, much safer, and much more fun place to be in. But we think that only happens through the fact that you participate in the movement, that you participate by having the account and talking about changing the technology as we move forward. By not participating, the technology stays in its most base form, and you keep all those risks, but you don't reap as many of the benefits. The other thing I'd like to talk about is that by participating, we get to evolve our curriculum, like creating digital citizenship, which is going to help people be able to better understand the technology, set limits for themselves, and in a sense, self-regulate themselves and stop the addiction that may happen. Because if kids aren't educated about this, they're going to fall into those traps, as in with every single technology and any function, anything you could think of. If you don't educate people about it, there can be abuse. So I think that by continuing digital citizenship courses, which are relatively new but are growing in our countries, I think that's really important. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about liberal movements. So one example of this is that social media was crucial for organizing the Arab Spring uprisings in Egypt and in other countries in the Middle East. Social media was linked to 14 million different geolocated users in the Middle East, which were tied with the protests in 16 different countries. Another example of this is instead of just focusing on Facebook, Twitter, and the big giants, there are also very small social media organizations in other countries which are used to create a counter public and a counter culture against autocratic regime. One example of this is in Turkey. In his book, Journey into Social Activism, Joshua Atkinson analyzes the role of the Independent Communication Network, which is a social media organization which utilizes a large pool and a decentralized member base in order to get share different stories around Turkey about oppressive practices and human rights violations. And this wouldn't happen without the social media platform. It's not just people sharing stories like an internet site like the New York Times. It utilizes its individual member base to pool stories together in order to bring attention to these issues. And it creates a decentralized public, which makes it very difficult for the government to track down and take out the leadership and stop these movements. We think that it's very important to realize that in countries like Turkey, in countries like China, in Middle Eastern countries that don't have the free press, the only way for people to get a free exchange of ideas, the only way for you to have a free press is through social media, where the users can contribute and share their stories with the rest of the community. And this allows for underground liberal movements to take place, and it's the only way for them to survive. In a world where there's state-run media that's the only sanctioned option. This is the only way for our for liberal activists in these countries to rally around a common cause, to produce a plethora of information about local issues, and to share their stories of oppression, but also mobilize people on behalf of that story. So in those reasons, we gladly oppose the motion. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for their comments, and I now invite the Prime Minister to begin their cross-examination.
Thank you. I'm just going to set my timer. So if the suffragettes globally in the 1920s were able to successfully organize protests to achieve a change in voting franchise without the use of social media, why are we not able to participate in political and social conversations without social media?
I think that question has a large Western lens put on it, because in nations like England and the United States, where the women didn't have the vote yet, they still had the right to speak freely. They also had states' rights. So in certain states in the United States, let's say, there were already congresswomen. They couldn't vote for themselves, but they could still participate in the government. So in those specific examples in the 1920s, 30s, whatnot, when you see women getting enfranchisement, they're already allowed into the conversation. In countries like Turkey, in countries like Egypt, in countries like China, people just don't have the right to speak up against the government. They don't have those political enfranchisements. They have technological firewalls that prevent them from accessing certain information. So you have these decentralized cells that are able to access social media through VPN and Tor and whatnot, and also use these underground internet methods to share their stories. And that's a very unique thing to countries that don't have political freedom.
So you mentioned China and these underground movements. To what extent do you think that people that live in these autocratic regimes actually use social media? Are they not too afraid to share their thoughts and engage in these underground movements for fear of getting caught? As is the example with Russia, for example, where people who attend protests or are seen to be engaging with protests on social media are arrested without a fair trial.
Yeah, so in the case of China, there's actually a good book called titled Twitter and Tear Gas. And one of the ways that people will have a counterculture in China is that one person may use VPN and Tor to access Western outlets. They'll try to get, use back channels to get into the internet. And what they then use is social media to get their Western information, free press. So if you want to know what's happening to the Uyghur Muslims in China, you have one person do this, and then they may be able to disseminate the information to like 100 or 200 other people. So there's all these little cells, because not everyone's able to access the Western media, but if one person can do it and then help that community, it may not organize huge protests, but at least it allows free information to get into those countries when it wouldn't happen otherwise.
I thank you both for your thoughtful questions and answers. And now I invite the Deputy Prime Minister to provide a 6-minute constructive in favor of today's motion. Hear, hear. You're muted. Let's start again. No worries, we've all done it.
I set my timer and started speaking. Okay, well, hello everyone, thank you for being here today. I will be further affirming the motion in question in support of all of us deleting our social media accounts. I thank the opposition for their points and views, all of which ignore the depth and danger of the problem at hand. I will be exploring 2 main points today relating to the negative social impact of social media and its impact on the general public, and why measures should be taken to combat the problems we're currently facing. My first point is about the addictive nature of social media, and the result of which means our time is being wasted as we spend excessive amounts of time on platforms which, although have some positive features, as the opposition points out, have more harmful effects than we acknowledge or are aware of. The statistics show that the average person spends nearly 2 hours a day using social media, which amounts to 5 years and 4 months of their lifetime. In that time, a person could run more than 10,000 marathons or travel to the moon and back 32 separate times. It's important to be in control of your time and the time that you spend on social media. Otherwise, it can destroy your physical and mental health over time. As most people struggle to control this, the best method is to just delete it altogether. For teenagers, these figures more than triple. Social media time spent could be up to 9 hours every day. If more people deleted social media or control their usage significantly, productivity levels are predicted to increase significantly as people start to do other things, such as they start walking more, they start reading, taking up hobbies, other things that could be more productive during their time. They could see their friends and family and focus more on in-person communication and just living in the moment. This addiction stems from dopamine signals in your brain, which increases when you log on to your favorite apps. These neurotransmitters are associated with pleasure. The positive feelings experienced are only temporary, and they're very similar to drug addictions. Once the dopamine wears off, you come back and you want more. This causes other problems such as sleep deprivation and sleep disorders, and this impacts society as a whole. It reduces productivity, and it also causes more dangerous problems. And a study by AT&T shows that over 90% of drivers have admitted to using their phones behind the wheel, and this is mainly to check their social media whilst driving. And this just shows you the true danger of social media and the level of addiction that we're dealing with here. And in addition to all of that, Silicon Valley executives have actually publicly told us and have said that they have banned their children from using social media. So if they are confident enough to share this information publicly, knowing that it won't really impact people, people will still continue to use it and continue to be addicted to it, that in itself shows you how addictive it is. My second point relates to how social media is used negatively to promote terrorism and acts as an avenue for fake news and propaganda in political campaigns. Social media was created to connect people with each other, people who are geographically near and far, strangers as well as loved ones. The problem arises as these platforms also connect like-minded criminals in a way where they can freely discuss and plan their crimes and expand their groups, reaching out to any other people who may be vulnerable or interested in such things. A high-profile example of this is Smallville actress Alison Mack, who was a part of a cult named NXIVM, which was essentially a slave and master system. Her role involved recruiting young females who were trafficked and enslaved, and this was disguised as a self-help organization. She used social media platforms like Twitter to pick out recruits and target them, and she encouraged other women to attend these conventions and events. And to help you understand the depth of this danger, the leader of the cult was actually sentenced to 125 years imprisonment. And these types of cults and organizations are widespread across social media, and social media acts as an avenue for them and expands their groups. Therefore, by deleting social media, people aren't only safer, but it will also help prevent these sorts of crimes, as these platforms with a significantly reduced amount of users will be forced to shut down. Another example is how ISIS has become so powerful so quickly due to social media technology. They also recruit and group young people online. And an example of this is a girl named Shamuma Begum in the UK, who was only 15 when she joined ISIS, leaving her family, her school life behind. And she was spoken to online and was convinced that this was the best thing for her to do. She left and she fled to Syria, and she's amongst many others who've been targeted by ISIS through social media. And then when it comes to politics, the rise of populism, the spread of xenophobic ideas, and the proliferation of fake news in democratic societies can be blamed on social media. The difference between traditional sources of media, such as newspapers, radio, TV, and social media is two main things. There are low barriers to entry for social media. Anybody can make an account, a fake account, and they don't need to prove anything. It's not like as stringent as you know, the news and newspapers. The second thing is that social media relies on user-generated content. So anyone can make a post, make up a story, and post it online. It doesn't have to go through any kind of regulations or, you know, fact checking. So therefore, the quality of information is not great. And, you know, most of the time, a lot of the time, it may not be true. And this causes political misconceptions. And in addition to this, the low cost of creating automated accounts and the ability to post content using anonymous or impersonated accounts, this enables the manipulation of online content seen by real users. And potentially this leads to political persuasion. And the data that online platforms collect about their users could be and have been used to target specific groups to make such manipulations more effective. And an example of this is the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for your comments. And now I invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to begin their cross-examination.
Alrighty, so for the point on addiction, it seems like a bit of a first world problem. Why can't students and young people just set time limits for themselves, turn off their phone and go do something else for a couple hours a day before returning to their phone later?
Well, that's very easy to say, but in practice, I can like tell you that myself and other people on this call right now, you plan to be productive, you plan to switch off your phone, you even take measures to, you know, set like time limits on your phone. But a lot of the time that doesn't happen. A lot of the time you lose track, you procrastinate, you know, you're enjoying yourself. It's really difficult. And especially for young people, for teenagers who, you know, their main concern is to keep connected with other people, to see what's happening online. They've got fear of missing out. They want to know what's going on all the time. So it's not as easy as just saying it. Yes, true, we could put measures in place, but at the same time, you can't control such a widespread use of social media like that easily.
Alrighty, so when you talk about how people should read, have hobbies, go hang out with their family instead, don't you concede that social media allows people to connect with reading new things, with finding new hobbies, or talking to their family across the globe in a way that they wouldn't be able to without social media?
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. We aren't saying that we shouldn't use social media to connect with family and friends. That's absolutely fine. But the problem lies when you're spending too much time on social media and that time can be spent doing something else. And yes, you can read online and it expands, you know, your reach, but at the same time, you need to think about your health and your physical health, and looking at a screen for a long time can actually impact your eyesight. We don't even know the extent of the issues that could arise. And, you know, going outside and doing things is very different to just sitting on your phone and going on social media platforms. It's a lot healthier for your body. So if you weren't on your phone, you would be doing these alternative things that I've listed, which are actually healthier for you.
I'd like to thank both our participants for their thoughtful questions and answers. And now, as soon as I figure out how to work my own timer, and now I invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to finish out the constructive section of this debate. Hear, hear.
All right, timer out. Before I start my time, my name is Solomon. I'll be picking off where my partner left. I'd like to extend a few thank yous before I get started. The first to my coach, Justin Kirk, who works relentlessly to ensure that debate is both educational and fun for us. The fact that he's here today, despite getting food poisoning yesterday, is a testament to how much he loves this activity. If that had happened to me, this debate probably would not have happened. I would probably have taken the week off. So thank you, Justin. I also would like to thank the university speech and debate program, as well as our opponents for being here today. As society becomes more and more polarized, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find spaces for respectful intellectual exchanges like this. So events like this are really important. It's an honor and a privilege to represent the University of Nebraska. And with that, I will start my time. I'd like to begin by reiterating our framing argument. Social media is a powerful tool. We believe that if properly regulated, it can transform the lives of everyone for the better. We prepared 3 reasons why we think that you should agree. Our first argument is social media facilitates civic engagement. There are 2 warrants. The first is social activism. Let's use Black Lives Matter as an example. Black Lives Matter, or BLM, one of the largest social movements in the United States. Dewey, Buchanan, and Patel, writing for the New York Times, found that 15 to 26 million Americans protested the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others last summer. This peaked on June 6th, when nearly 500,000 Americans took to the streets in over 500 locations across the country. An indispensable part of this massive mobilization was social media. In their book, Scaling Social Movements Through Social Media, Munt, Ross, and Burnett argue that social media plays an important role in meaning-making and resource mobilization, which can help build coalitions both within and across movements, expanding the overall movement's impact. This has been abundantly evident in many other examples, like Stop Asian Hate and #MeToo. Another example that's much closer to home for us Nebraskans is the wave of protesters against the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. In response to multiple assault allegations at the fraternity, the student body used social media to organize and mobilize several protests. Social media allowed the story to reach the national consciousness with coverage from mainstream news sources and nearly 500,000 petitions on a signature to ban the fraternity. Here we can see another example of a grassroots movement that was able to quickly scale itself and organize itself using social media. Our second warrant is social media helps get out the vote. Sarah Fryer, writing for Bloomberg, explains that Facebook and Instagram have helped millions of people register to vote. Social media is particularly effective at reaching younger demographics who will be voting for the first time or those who don't typically read the news. Because of its massive user base, social media is an effective tool for disseminating voter information. Of course, the pendulum swings both ways here, with fake news being a legitimate concern. However, we believe that that's part of a larger discussion on how to arm people with critical thinking skills and how to hold news and social media companies accountable. Our second argument today is social media is a useful tool for response and relief during natural disasters. There are two warrants. The first is social media can improve the dissemination of emergency warning and response information during and after a natural disaster. When Hurricane Katrina ravaged the Gulf Coast in 2005, Americans were trapped in rolling blackouts with no cell service. In 2005, social media was still very new and not widely used. Flash forward to Hurricane Sandy 7 years later. Before, during, and after the disaster, millions of Americans turned to Twitter and Facebook to keep informed, locate loved ones, and notify authorities and first responders. These benefits even extend beyond the United States. As Nepal experienced its worst earthquake in more than 80 years, which killed more than 4,800 people, Facebook activated its special feature, Safety Check, which helped friends and family locate their loved ones. Users close to the disaster site could use the app to mark themselves safe. These benefits even extend beyond natural disasters to any tragedy, or like, for example, domestic terrorism. Think of incidents like the Boston bombing. Our second warrant here is social media can help identify and address physical, medical, and emotional needs after a natural disaster. Technology already built into these social media applications, such as location detection and data visualization, allows first responders to identify urgent needs and to do so very quickly. Additionally, social media can also be used to mobilize volunteers all over the world during and after a crisis. And finally, social media can also allow users to raise and donate money and resources to victims of natural disasters. For example, Facebook has allowed users all over the world to raise millions of dollars in donations. Our third and final argument is that social media allows average Americans to become aware of social issues around them and around the country. By consolidating and reducing the difficulty of access, social media enables people from diverse backgrounds to become aware of social issues around them. For example, for a long time, Americans all around the country have been fighting a quiet war against a social pest. Thanks to the power of social media, we have now identified several characteristics of the species known as Karens. These include not wearing a mask, asking to speak to managers, a poorly maintained Rachel, entitled and dismissive attitude. These Karens can be identified in two ways. One is location. These include, some examples include the San Francisco Karen, the New York Karen, and our very own Lincoln, Nebraska's Super Saver Karen. Another way of identifying Karens is their favorite activity. Some examples include Anti-Vax Alexis, Dog Park Dolores, Target Tina, Talkback Tammy, and Golf Cart Gail. This group of entitled upper middle class women routinely weaponize their privilege for important causes like shutting down little girls' lemonade stands, ending pool parties, and ruining a good bird watching day in Central Park. Besides the massive entertainment value they provide to the internet, the Karen phenomenon on social media has been beneficial for three reasons. First, social media exposure has vindicated innocent people who otherwise may have not been believed, like Christian Cooper in the Central Park Karen incident. Secondly, these examples provide social proof for a widespread problem and start important conversations. Officers of the law and average Americans are now more willing to quickly assess the role that power dynamics play in confrontations. Third, they serve as massive deterrents to aspiring Karens and Kevins. By the way, if you don't like this argument or want to speak to my manager, I don't want to say you're a Karen, but you might need to look in the mirror. Ultimately, Mark and I believe that the COVID-19 pandemic functions as an impact filter for the round. More than a year of relative isolation has reminded us all of the important connections that we have with each other and how empty life could feel without them. Social media presents the opportunity to connect 4.5 billion of us worldwide. We cannot afford to waste this opportunity. That's why we as the opposition firmly believe that you should not delete your social media. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for their comments and now invite the deputy leader to begin their cross-examination. Hear, hear.
Thank you for your points. My first question is that you mentioned that social media, if properly regulated, is very beneficial. And we agree, but how do you propose it is properly regulated as it is so difficult to control it?
Well, first, we think that regulation is a solution rather than banning it, because this technology will always exist, as Mark talked about earlier. It's inevitable. We think that some kinds of regulation look like, for example, putting time restrictions on the amount of time that we use the content, holding companies accountable for the kinds of information that are distributed. We need a better comprehensive legislative framework for addressing this new emerging technology, because we think that like our lawmakers don't fundamentally understand this technology, and that's creating the problems that we see today.
Thank you. And as I mentioned in my speech, there are different ways that political parties, for example, and advertising companies target users online and look at their political kind of views and target them in certain ways. And you've said that social media helps people register to vote. And my argument is there are many different ways to encourage young people to vote that don't involve bias targeting methods.
Sure. I mean, like we said, we think that properly regulated, this can be a really good tool. And if we look at in terms of effectiveness, like Facebook and Instagram have led millions of people who otherwise would not have signed up to vote to do so. So we think that like this is a net good, especially when so many young people are on there. It's a really good tool for potentially mobilizing support and getting like voters to support issues that we want, or just voting in general.
Thank you.
Is that time?
We've got 2 seconds, so that's the fundamentally time.
Awesome.
Once again, thank the speakers for both their questions and comments. And now we enter the last half of this debate, where a speaker from each side will provide what's known as a whip speech, or a summary of their thoughts about the debate today. So now I invite the government whip to speak, not lasting more than 4 minutes in length. Hear, hear.
Thank you, David. So to summarize the proposition, our arguments, we firstly spoke about the individual impact, negative impact that social media has on people, things like causing self-esteem problems and safety. And then we went into the social impact more generally, so the impact that politics and terrorism has, social media has on that, and also the problem of addiction. Now, the opposition has mentioned multiple benefits that we agree with, and we think social media does have a lot of benefits, but the problem here lies in the fact that the disadvantages and the problems that exist with the safety and dangers and the crimes that social media actually commits is more important than the benefits. The benefits can actually be obtained from various sources, like my partner Yasmin mentioned. You can go into stores and buy magazines, and you can communicate with your friends and family through WhatsApp and email, and there are different methods of doing the same thing. And also, in addition to that, you can also have the benefits of registering to vote and reading the news and all of that through methods that are actually regulated. And the social media itself is too dangerous to allow it to go on. So if we all delete our social media accounts, then that will force the social media platforms to shut down, and there won't be enough users, and there'll be alternative, safer ways to connect with people and achieve the same goals. The opposition also mentioned the Arab Spring and autocratic regimes, and the problem there lies that the autocratic regimes also conduct surveillance and propaganda through social media in a lot of negative ways, and that leads to people and individuals who are quite innocent and don't realize the impact of what they've done. They get put in prison, they get fined, and they suffer a lot of consequences from a simple thing such as posting online, posting their views online. And so it shouldn't be that easy. If you look at all the points that have been raised today, you'll see that when you think about it, when you think about yourself and the benefits that you get from deleting your social media account and all the different things that you could get involved with otherwise, and the reach that you could have. For example, the opposition also raises the point that people have a voice when they are on social media. They get to put their points across, and they wouldn't be heard otherwise. And I disagree with that point, because there are various methods that you could voice your concerns. In the UK, at least, you could write letters to the Prime Minister. You could start petitions and actually get people involved, talk to people, connect with people in person, and use online platforms. They can sign these signatory, they can become signatories and agree with these ideas. And it doesn't need social media. It doesn't need the risk of fake news being easily impacting their views and changing their minds, and them being targeted, people being vulnerable and being targeted in a way that is really unfair and illegal. And it's quite difficult for the government and regulators to put in place all these measures that would protect people. So people need to protect themselves, and this is the way that we are proposing they do that, is by deleting their social media accounts and looking at alternative ways to continue living their lives and connecting with others. So thank you for your time today.
I'd like to thank the government bench for an excellent government position. And now, to close out this portion of the debate, we will have the opposition whip speaker.
All right. As an overview response to the government's case, remember that one, the resolution is asking a general question. There are obviously people in this world that should definitely delete their social media. Anyone who wants a list can just come to talk to me afterwards. However, today's resolution is asking if it makes sense for broader society to follow suit. And two, social media is a tool. Like any technology, it's more about the user than the technology itself. As a spectator, the question you're being asked to make a judgment on is the merits of new and emerging technology. Don't let the government make perfect the enemy of the good. With that, let's respond to the specific arguments they made in the order they were made. The first is mental health. The government claims that social media is bad for mental health. We disagree. We can see that poor social media use can be detrimental to one's health, but there are several benefits if it's used mindfully. There are three main ones. First, Amy Roeder, writing for the Harvard School of Public Health, explains that social media provides a platform for overcoming barriers of distance and time. For example, if a pandemic were to happen, routine social media usage would compensate for diminishing face-to-face social interactions. In children, social media abuse is associated with negative mental health. We, the opposition, believe, however, it's the role of parents to manage their children's exposure to social media to ensure that they learn responsible digital citizenship now before it's too late. The second reason is support groups. Social media allows people all over the world to find their niche support group during tough times. Mental health services are inaccessible in many parts of the world. Social media can help individuals find vital connections if they live in remote areas or have limited independence, social anxiety, or are part of a marginalized group. The third reason is social media empowers people to express themselves. Munman, writing for the National Center of Biotechnology Information, found that self-disclosure is an important therapeutic ingredient and is linked to improved physical, psychological well-being. Social media allows individuals to withhold their actual identities, allowing them to engage in more candid self-disclosure than is possible in offline settings. Now let's move to safety. First, we would say that my opponents cherry-pick their examples. Sure, there are some safety concerns with social media, just like with anything else, but we should do what we usually do with emerging technology and legislate regulations that will prevent that abuse. This is a better long-term solution, and because as Marx says, not engaging with the technology will leave the problem. Now let's move to addiction. The government claims that deleting social media can significantly free up our time to do things like run marathons or go to the moon and back.
We've already talked about how regulations can solve back for these issues, but we want to assert that spending time on social media can be used positively. We, the opposition, believe that social media can be good for education. Here are a few reasons. First, social media is a better tool for communicating. Students inside and outside classrooms use it every day to communicate with instructors and classmates. Second, social media can improve information literacy. In 2019, the Pew Research Center found that this generation is the best at discerning good from bad information on the internet. Third, social media is advantageous for long distance learning opportunities. There are many disadvantaged students who are not able to acquire formal educations by attending regular classes in educational institutions. With the help of various online tools and social media, modern educators are able to attract students to distance learning programs. Now, let's move to data abuse. My opponents claim that social media opens up our data for abuse from parties like ISIS or human traffickers. We have a few responses. First, we don't think that this is a reason to delete your social media. This is an issue that lawmakers, like our friends in the government, need to address with legislation. These issues are currently prevalent because it seems like no one in Congress understands this technology. If you don't believe me, go watch the Facebook congressional deposition. Technological advancement is inevitable. We need to elect savvy leaders who are able to legislate this new frontier. As an underview, we believe that we have made the stronger case today. We want you to leave with 3 key takeaways. First, social media is a tool. Like all amazing tools, there's a risk of abuse. However, that doesn't mean that we should throw the tool away. We should do what we always do with disruptive inventions and regulate it. Second, the benefits of social media massively outweigh the harms. It has radically changed the way that we interact with information and each other. From natural disaster relief to education to free speech for the world's most oppressed and civic engagement, the very natures of this technology is a testament to the power of human connection. We have to protect that. Finally, no matter where you end up in this debate, social media is an inevitable part of our lives. Pushing people off will only hurt our ability to regulate it. We shouldn't put our heads in the sand and wait until we can't avoid it anymore. We should learn how to become responsible digital citizens. Thanks to all participants and organizers and spectators. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you to all our competitors. And before I open it up to questions, a few reminders. First and foremost, we'd like to thank the National Communication Association Committee for International Discussion and Debate for helping us bring this together each and every year. And another shout out to our guests from the UK. First and foremost, working professionals who come back and dedicate time to an important activity and sharing their knowledge and experience. It's always great when we have the opportunity to go over to the UK and compete and to have folks like you judging and giving us feedback. It's a huge help to us. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to set the timer to allow a few minutes for the audience. If you have questions, you're welcome to either ask them. I've already had someone who didn't want to speak up send me something through chat. So if you want to go that route and put something in chat, but it's your opportunity. And lastly, remember, these 4 debaters might not necessarily believe everything they're saying. Part of the idea behind debate is to engage in thought projects in which you defend and advocate for positions that you've been challenged to do so. And in this case, that's what they were doing, trying to build the best possible case to help us become better thinkers. I think they did a phenomenal job on that. So when asking questions, please treat the competitors with respect as they're trying to help us learn through this discussion. So now I open the floor if anyone would like to ask a question. I'll read you the one that I have that someone sent me through a PM, and this is dedicated to the government team. There was a lot of talk about the United States. Do you see any difference in the social media there versus maybe in the United States that we're unaware of?
Sorry, was that the difference between, was that the UK and the US?
Yes.
I think maybe there are some differences. I think ultimately, I assume there are more similarities than differences. I think maybe the biggest difference comes when we're looking at social media use in, as the opposition were talking about, like autocratic regimes versus kind of Western governments. And I can see there that the use of social media is different. Even though it's different, we still disagree on their part that it helps these kind of democratic regimes flourish. We actually think it does the opposite. But in terms of the difference between the UK and the US, I think there's probably more similarities than not, especially when you go on platforms such as Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, where a lot of the content is kind of worldwide, a global, generic, appealing more to people's age groups and demographics as opposed to their location. And I think what's more harmful with that social media is that what they're trying to do is target, say, 15-year-old girls or 20-year-old men, and their location around the Western world doesn't matter. It's more their demographics and what people can tap into their minds in order to kind of manipulate, make them buy something or make them feel a certain way.
All right, do any of our audience members have a question they'd like to throw in besides? And like you said, you can put it in chat, even if you want to send it privately. Any question's a good question. All right, so we have on the topic of safety and protecting everyone from, as an example, catfishing, wouldn't those who want to target someone still find a way to do that over other apps once we delete social media apps?
That's a great question, Caitlin. We agree. Caitlin.
I think that probably goes to the government. Let's see what they have to say.
I think, again, we would disagree with that to some extent, in that, yes, like catfishing can always happen, and say maybe 50 years ago when there wasn't social media, maybe someone received a letter in the post from someone claiming to be their aunt from America that they'd never heard of, and maybe someone would fall scam to, you know, sending some money in the post, but on a far lesser scale than how it can happen on social media now, where someone can access any photos they want. They can create a profile that completely mimics someone that could exist in your life, and they can really allow you to believe that they are someone through things like voice editing apps where they can make themselves sound different, to a variety of different things. I think that is very, very different to what it was like without social media apps, where there were people still falling victim to scams, of course, but on a much lesser extent.
All right, there was another one sent earlier, but if someone wants to buzz in person, we'll hold off on that. Does anyone else have a question?
Hello, my name's Aaron. Recently, I saw a news story today that was about one of the national parks here in the U.S. and they had just located the body of a missing girl from Grand Teton National Park. But I saw this was widely posted about on social media and different things. And from just learning about things with like the social media, there's families who are reunited. There can be long lost people who are found, or just people who are found maybe due to like missing cases or different crimes. If deleting all social media, how would we like make up for the power that social media holds, and you know, this like getting across to so many other people? Like, how could we make up with that if it were deleted, if that makes sense?
I agree that social media does extend the reach of certain in certain situations, but the fact is that if there is a missing person, there will be a missing person report, and there will be a criminal investigation. And so there are other measures in place. And if anything, you can use news outlets, newspapers to, you know, reach out and find these people. And there are other methods of doing that other than social media. And let's not forget, we aren't against, you know, Google and other websites that aren't social media platforms. And there are so many avenues and dedicated websites to these sorts of situations. So the internet does help, but social media specifically, we are arguing, has more negative impacts than positives.
On that point, there was a question directed towards the opposition. We'll get to you in a second, Cindy, just really quickly about anxiety at universities, where students are under a lot of pressure through social media. It's exacerbating the problems from eating disorders to stress. How do you speak to that? Because I think that was a very important point the government team was making.
Yeah, certainly. I think that the answer can be kind of brought out in several different ways. I think, first of all, we need to have digital citizenship. When I went to elementary school, that wasn't a reality, so I kind of had to learn how to navigate on my own. But just 6 years later, with my younger brother going through elementary school, that was an everyday reality for him in class in elementary school. So we think that having digital citizenship classes taught in public school is a really huge part of it, and being able to regulate it and train students on how to use the tool responsibly. And we think that's preferable to outright deleting it for everyone, because we think that like that one size fits all solution just isn't really tenable, but also, you know, we see people losing out on the possible benefits. So I think that, and also everyone's different. So people having their own different regulations that they can impose on themselves is important. Second of which, we think that there is a role for legislators to play, but I think that has to do more with, looking at fake news and false information. But when it comes to mental health, the other thing is that along with the self-regulation, along with digital citizenship, we see that support groups also come up through social media. So I think that part of it has to do with getting people more access to more people, which social media allows us to do in those support groups, and then also realizing that those mental health concerns will still be an issue, whether or not social media exists or doesn't exist, because the triggers for that to happen can still happen through reality TV, through texting your friends, through hearing with your friends. Like, all that drama is still going to be around. And we understand that it may be easier to happen with social media. We think that there are better ways for us to fix that problem, which don't include everyone deleting the platform and making sure they all go under and out of business.
All right, and Sydney has a great question of clarification for the government team. A lot of your data talked about the impacts on women and young girls, and she wants to know, did you see any data on men and young boys as well in the negative impacts of social media?
Absolutely, there is a huge host of information that is exactly similar to the information we found on women and young girls. I know for sure in the UK, the biggest killer for men under the age of 30 is suicide. And that has exponentially risen in line with the rise in social media. I think there's a lot of studies as well that show that there's a huge correlation between kind of male negative body image and what they're seeing online. Because it's right, we do talk about young women and girls a lot more than we talk about men, but that's kind of part of the problem. And I think a lot of what we see on social media encourages and exacerbates what we see with kind of men, say, like, not talking about their feelings, or having those slogans where, like, real men don't cry, things like that. That's exacerbated on social media, because whether you want to see that or not, people see that. And if you have young kind of impressionable boys seeing that, they then form some sort of kind of idea in their head about what they should look like, but also how they should act towards other people. So as we were talking about earlier in our speeches, we told you that social media can actually cut people off. It distances you between conversations with your friends and family because you think that you have to act a certain way. And that's something that's really affecting young men and boys today. And that kind of comes across mainly from social media.
We have a question from the audience in the room that I'm hosting in right now. And this one goes to the opposition whip, Salman. The question is, isn't parenting hard enough without having to regulate social media too?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I obviously don't have any experience with it, but I think that, as Mark mentioned, digital citizenship is going to be an important part of all of your children's lives. So in the same way that you prepare them for the real world in terms of work and making them social, this is going to be a key aspect of development that parents should be responsible for. But, it is a lot of work.
We have 2 questions left here in chat. We'll finish off with those 2 questions. I assume this kind of goes to the room, but it deals with how would you propose countries specifically legislate the massive field that is social media? And I think that's what the government's been asking of the opposition at some level. How does that look?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So we talked a little bit about some of the smaller features that can be integrated into the applications, like screen time monitoring and parental supervision that can allow parents to kind of have more access. But in terms of the bigger issues, like fake news, I think that has to be a legal conversation that happens in the halls of Congress. But like I said, I'm not too optimistic with our current branch of government because they don't really understand technology. And so I think that that's a substantial problem that we need to address in order to begin implementing these like larger scale reforms that are going to change the way that we use social media for the better.
If I could jump in as well really quickly, I think that part of the conversation has to do with Section 230 and how we regulate that. And if we make the social media giants responsible for the content that gets put out. And there's a pretty heated debate about that currently and over the last few months, because I think that if Section 230 goes away, then the social media companies become much more responsible for the content that's out there, which then means that they're going to be much more incentivized to make sure that, ISIS propaganda or, populist fake news or anti-vax rhetoric doesn't get out. But at the same time, the fact that people are participating in the social media experience already, and the fact that people are already talking about it, also just causes the social media companies to self-regulate. The threat of the government doing anything has caused the social media companies to mobilize in such a massive way, put filters and tags and warnings on things, which they hadn't done in years previous. So we think that change and the evolution of social media to make it more safe and better regulated can happen through the government, but also just the threat of the government acting has caused them to self-regulate, which we also think is much more important.
All right, once again, I thank everybody for their comments. Unfortunately, we're running a little late on time, so we're going to have to cut it short here, in large part because we want to give you a chance to vote if you like. And we've got the audience vote up. Remember, it's not a question of what your personal opinions are. It's what you think happened here today, who did the best job of putting their case forward. And that being said, I think both teams did a tremendous job. So another round of applause for both teams. Lots of interesting points and ideas that I think can help us have a better understanding of this topic going forward.
Is there any way for us to see the vote without voting ourselves? I feel like we're a little biased.
Yes, I can put the vote up on the screen. Give me just a second. Oh.
It's happening in real time. It's like a game.
9 of 14.
Dave, are we as participants supposed to vote? Because I feel like
no, don't vote.
All right, good. I didn't.
All right. You have the results. It's a very close debate, and that's my favorite type of debate. It really doesn't matter in the end, I think, and I tell all my students their first year of debate, I don't care if you win a single debate, get a single first place. I don't care if you get last place every single time, as long as you learn something. And I did. Again, it's great having people come with different perspectives and garnering some information from them about their understanding of the world. And we look forward to being able to meet our friends from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in person someday, and along with hopefully seeing our guests from the UK. If you come to Chicago, I promise you a slice of deep dish pizza and a fun time around the city. We owe you one. We normally get a chance to take you off. But once again, here to all the competitors, thank you so much for taking the time to help us with this.
Thank you so much for everybody who participated. Thanks to Yasmin and Aya really for taking the time out of your evening. We know it's late there, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate it as well. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you for having us.
And seriously, if you're ever in the States and need something, look us up. We'd love to have you come by the campus and say hello.